Section 3, Theories of Development. Your goal by the end of this section is to be able to describe the main theories of human development. The nature of development is very complicated, with questions about the roles of nature and nurture, stability and change, and continuity and discontinuity. The best tool we have at our disposal for answering questions about the nature of development is the scientific method. This is a four-step process. First, you conceptualize a process or problem to be studied. Next, you collect data. Then you analyze that data. And finally, you draw your conclusions. When researchers are formulating a problem to study, they often draw on theories and develop a hypothesis. A theory is an interrelated, coherent set of ideas that helps explain phenomena and make predictions. A theory may suggest a hypothesis, which is a specific assertion and prediction that can be tested. This section discusses aspects of 5 theoretical orientations to development: psychoanalytic, cognitive, behavioral and social cognitive, ethological, and ecological. It's not a matter of which one is right or wrong, it's about what each theoretical orientation has contributed to our understanding of certain aspects of development. First, we'll discuss the oldest of the theories of development, psychoanalytic. Psychoanalytic theories emphasize the idea that most of our development occurs without our conscious awareness and is heavily influenced by emotions. As Freud listened to his patients talk, he felt that a lot of their problems seemed to be the result of childhood experiences. Eventually, he developed what he called his 5 stages of psychosexual development. Keep in mind that this was during the Victorian era, which could be described as a very emotionally and sexually repressed time period. So when people started venting to Freud, the topic of conversation often ended up taking a turn to forbidden subjects such as admitting that they hated their mother or admitting that they had sexual feelings that weren't considered acceptable at the time. Freud proposed that adult personality is determined by how we resolve conflicts between sources of pleasure at each stage of early development and the demands of reality. At any stage, according to Freud, the source of our pleasure might be undergratified or overgratified. If that happens, again according to Freud, the person can be fixated at that stage of development. The first stage is the oral stage. Babies love putting things in their mouth. That's how they explore early on. Freud thought that if someone has an oral fixation, such as always needing to eat something, smoke something, or otherwise have something in their mouth, that it's because that the person was either overfed or underfed as an infant. In the toddler years, the focus is on controlling bowel movements. If the parents were too strict or harsh about potty training, the child could develop an overly heightened fear of making messes or losing control. This is where we get the term anal retentive from, or sometimes we now say things like, "Oh, I'm just really anal about the way I fold my towels." We get that expression from Freud. The next stage is the phallic stage, and this is the stage where children start paying attention to their genitals. It's a time of self-exploration and gender identity. From 6 years to puberty is the latency stage, or as I call it, the Freud couldn't think of anything stage. In this stage, the child represses any sexual interests and instead focuses on developing social and intellectual skills. The last stage is the genital stage, which starts with puberty and is the stage in which a person begins developing romantic interests. Here, someone might receive too much or too little romantic attention, affecting their well-being. Another psychoanalytic theory is Erikson's psychosocial theory. Erikson was a student of Freud's and thought that Freud was onto something with the idea of there being stages of life that we need to successfully maneuver. However, Erikson also said, hey, whoa, not everything is about sex, and there's no reason why the stages should stop at puberty. Erikson felt that the primary motivation for human behavior didn't stem from repressed sexual urges, but rather from our desire to affiliate with other people. Human beings are social creatures and continue to be throughout their lives. Therefore, he proposed 8 psychosocial stages, representing 8 key social crises that must be resolved in order for us to develop into our most well-adjusted selves. The first stage is trust versus mistrust. Here, the social goal is for the infant to learn basic trust in people. If I'm hungry, will someone feed me? If I'm upset, will someone comfort me? The next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Here, a toddler is trying to gain a sense of bodily independence. Toddlers are always wanting to do things for themselves, dress themselves, buckle their own seatbelt, pour their own cereal. If they're constantly told, no, you're too little, or no, I need to do that for you, then they start to doubt their own abilities. In early childhood, the stage is initiative versus guilt. Here, preschoolers are entering a more social world and learning that they need to be responsible and well-mannered. Otherwise, they can develop a sense of anxiety or entitlement. Industry versus inferiority aligns with the elementary school years. Children either develop a sense of mastery and knowledge, or they can feel incompetent compared to their peers. In identity versus confusion, adolescents are trying to establish their sense of who they are and what they want out of life, independently of what their parents might want for them. For instance, one teenager might decide that they want to continue working in the family business because that's what they want to do, whereas another might also decide to work in the family business, but only begrudgingly and out of a sense of obligation to their parents. They may have chosen the same role, but the second teenager might not have the same positive self-identity as the first. In our 20s and 30s, we enter the intimacy versus isolation stage, where we attempt to form healthy friendships and intimate relationships. If not, we experience a sense of isolation. Our 40s and 50s are marked by generativity versus stagnation, where our social goal is to contribute to future generations. This can be through parenting, mentoring, community work, or anything like that. Stagnation occurs if you feel like you haven't done anything useful to contribute to future generations. Finally, in late adulthood, we enter integrity versus despair. Here, we reflect back on our lives as a whole and either have a feeling that we led an acceptable life or whether we are filled with regrets and despair. Psychoanalytic theories are among the oldest theories, and although they leave a lot to be desired, they did have some important contributions. For one thing, they acknowledge that we aren't always consciously aware of why we do things. They also made explicit the idea that who we are and who we become are influenced by our experiences. However, psychoanalytic theories, especially Freud's psychosexual stages, lack scientific support, place too much emphasis on sexual underpinnings, and seem to have a generally negative image of people. The next theoretical orientation we'll discuss is cognitive theories. Cognitive theories emphasize how our conscious thoughts develop. The 3 major ones are Piaget's cognitive development theory, Vygotsky's social cultural theory, and the information processing theory. Piaget's theory states that children go through 4 stages of cognitive development as they actively construct their understanding of the world. They do this through mentally organizing their experiences and adapting their way of thinking when they encounter something that doesn't make sense to them. Piaget categorized children's cognitive development in 4 main stages, each with its own distinct way of thinking. From birth to around 2 years old, a child's understanding of the world is constructed through physical interaction with it. Babies and toddlers touch things, taste things, grab things, throw things. By the end of this stage, they have gone from simple newborn reflexes to being able to understand symbolic thought. From roughly ages 2 through 7, the preoperational stage, the child begins to go beyond physical actions and represent the world with words, images, and drawings. However, they can't quite reason through things logically. If you give a 3-year-old a cookie and give their sibling 2 halves of a cookie, the 3-year-old will probably complain that their sibling has more cookies because 2 is more than 1. You could then break their cookie in half right in front of them and say, "There, now you have 2 also," and they will probably be satisfied that everything is fair again. In the concrete operational stage, the child can now reason logically about things as long as they have a concrete example to work with. This is necessary for a lot of concepts taught in school, which is why formal schooling tends to begin around this age. Piaget's last stage is the formal operational stage, which starts in adolescence and continues through adulthood. People can reason logically about abstract ideas and hypothetical situations, not just about what exists in reality or in concrete terms. This is why pre-algebra can be a struggle for students entering middle school. Some 6th graders may not have entered the formal operational stage yet, but they have to deal with a lot of abstract concepts in math. The other 2 major cognitive theories are Vygotsky's social-cultural theory and the information processing theory. Vygotsky's theory emphasizes the importance of culture and social interaction and how those guide our perceptions and thought patterns. Interacting with parents and older siblings help a child to develop their cognitive skills. There aren't distinct stages to this process. It's a gradual change. The information processing theory also views cognitive development as gradual rather than stage-like. Over time, people develop better learning strategies that help them perceive information, represent it mentally, store it, manipulate it, and retrieve it later on. Almost like a computer teaching itself thanks to some base algorithm. Cognitive theories have a more positive view of development than psychoanalytic theories, and their emphasis on the active construction of understanding have been immensely helpful in learning about development. However, there has been criticism that cognitive theories don't do a good enough job of accounting for individual variation. Plus, there was a bit of concern over how well we could actually measure thought processes at the time. Behavioral and social cognitive theories grew out of the belief that development is observable behavior that we can learn through experience with the environment. These theories emphasize continuity in development, not stages. The 2 main versions of behaviorism are Skinner's operant conditioning theory and Bandura's social cognitive theory. In Skinner's operant conditioning theory, behavior and development are shaped by rewards and punishment. Behaviors that are rewarded occur more frequently, while behaviors that are punished occur less frequently. Over a lifetime of experiences, the consequences of our behaviors mold us into who we are. In Bandura's social cognitive theory, a combination of behavior, environment, and cognition are key to development. We acquire these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors through a series of observations. We see other people do things, we observe the consequences of their actions, and by engaging in forethought, individuals guide and motivate themselves. The arrows here in this illustration illustrate how relations between behavior, person cognition, and environment are reciprocal rather than one way. Person cognition refers to cognitive processes such as thinking and planning, and personal characteristics, for example, believing that you can control your experiences. Another group of theories are ethological theories or ethological theories. These propose that behavior is strongly influenced by biology, tied to evolution, and characterized by critical or sensitive periods. The presence or absence of certain experiences during specific time frames has a long-lasting influence. When geese are born, for example, they attach onto the first moving object they see. This imprinting takes place during a critical period. A critical period is a time period in which something must take place in order for a certain developmental outcome to occur. John Bowlby applied ethological theory to human development as well. Although we may not have critical periods per se, we seem to have some sensitive periods of development. For example, if an infant doesn't form an attachment to caregivers in the first year of life, perhaps due to severe neglect, then this has important impacts on their ability to form healthy relationships later on. Although ethological theory contributes a focus on the biological nature of development, it has been criticized for its overemphasis on those biological foundations and a lack of flexibility regarding the concepts of critical and sensitive periods. Our early experiences impact our development, yes, but it's rarely as straightforward as baby geese imprinting. Whereas ethological theory emphasized biological factors, ecological theory, created by Yuri Bronfenbrenner, emphasizes environmental factors in development. In this theory, development reflects the influence of several environmental systems: the microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, and the macrosystem, and the chronosystem. The microsystem is where the person has direct social interactions with people in their immediate environment, their family, peers, school, and neighborhood. The mesosystem involves relationships between microsystems. For example, children whose parents have rejected them may have difficulty developing positive relationships with teachers. The exosystem consists of links between the person's immediate context and a social environment in which the person does not play an active role. For example, a change in a parent's employment status might increase marital stress and change the patterns of interactions between the parent and their child. The macrosystem involves the attitudes and ideologies of the culture in which the individuals live. And the chronosystem involves the patterns of events and transition that occur over the course of a person's lifetime and during the particular historical time period in which they lived. It is important to remember that no single theory explains the complexity of lifespan development. They are tools that help us organize information and make and test predictions. So instead of strictly following a single approach, consider using the strengths of each theory to help guide research.